Hi, everyone. I'm really excited for this episode of Branching Out. I get to chat with Samir Moda, a great friend, also the measurement innovation lead over at ITV. We knew each other and met each other back during our Google days. Back then, he was head of applied data science at Google. But Samir's really had a ton of influence on the entire ad and marketing industry, as well as the analytics and measurement industry. He's written for Marketing Week, Media Leader. He's done talks at various industry conferences. He's got a long background, and he's just a super pleasure to talk to. So, really looking forward to sharing this conversation with you all. And as you'll see, we'll probably need to do it again sometime really soon. Thank you so much, Samir.
Welcome to Branching Out by Bonsai, the podcast where marketing gets measured, myths get busted, and acronyms get explained. No filler, just the good stuff. Let's get into it.
So there's a bit that what it's like when you're interviewing or hiring. You usually end up having to do a bit about you.
Yeah.
I always end up doing the same story now, which has evolved over time. But broadly, I suppose I started out working on the kind of strategy side of things. Some people call that account planning, but typically it's the bit where you like thinking about where the business problem meets the consumer behavior. So, a business may want to sell a whole truckload of widgets, but what's the widget market like and how is that brand perceived and all those sorts of things. And I've always found that fascinating. And so I did that in lots of different kinds of creative agencies, digital direct marketing agencies. I think the only one I haven't done formally was PR. That was just a secondment. But other than that, but always doing the same role, just curious about the business challenge and then what do we know about the people. And I suppose over that time, I suspect like you encounter two classes of misuse or failure of data and analysis. And the first is the one where the data people rock up with some kind of analysis and it is indescribably boring. So it is, it's true but useless. And my favorite one, you get these sorts of data scientists who are just learning the trade, if you like. And they sort of go, okay, right, I can now geocode tweets or something. Or we can't call them tweets now, can we? And then they'll plot them all on a map. You go, look, I discovered this thing. And you go, yeah, that's Paris. We knew about Paris. Well done for learning the tech, but no. We didn't need you to tell us about Paris. And you get these sorts of things where they, because they're too far removed from the domain of the advertiser, say, or whatever, they don't have that filter of, well, there are the basic things that we know. Now, what's the weird stuff? What's the sort of unusual stuff that might cause us to do strategy differently? But then so that's kind of true but dull. And then you get the really nasty one, I think, which is the false but interesting. And this is somebody and look, we've all done it. I'm not proud. I too have picked one number and gone, yeah, okay, so we should totally change the strategy of what we're doing. All of this, all because this one number. At which point someone else comes along and goes, hang on a minute, isn't that number the same for all the brands in the category?
Yeah.
So why would we do anything differently? That's just normal, isn't it? And those are bad as well. I mean, usually they get rumbled at some point, but sometimes it can be years later, and that's dangerous. And so I ended up, I suppose, moving more towards data teams and data science teams, just because I wanted to get stuff that would have been interesting and useful for me with my strategy hat on, but that was also true and rigorous. So kind of useful truths for marketers. If I had a slogan or T-shirts, that would be on the T-shirts. They'd be very boring T-shirts, but that's kind of where I'm headed.
I think they'd be wonderful T-shirts. I love those 2 points. It's it's funny you mentioned those numbers you can share that are true but also telling a lie. I think a lot of people who don't have the data background, what they might not know is, business or marketing, it's a system, it's an ecosystem, it's alive, and these things are generally speaking dynamic. And so there's usually like two things you have to look at, and they're not like complicated a lot of times. It's like ROI and volume,
Yeah.
or it's, population and, whatever. And so, I mean, these are pretty intuitive. It's not super complicated, but you can almost always tell if someone's telling a lie with a truth if they share one number. One number,
Yeah.
when truth is basically defined by an interplay, and you pick a number, well, you're hiding another number, right? And so
Yes. No, that is
it's
very
it's
true. Yeah.
and then I love that part about the sharing the dull information. I'm sure you do too. I try to pick nicer words for like when I'm giving feedback on, you're sharing a bunch of trivia. It's exactly how I feel.
Yeah.
The reaction is just like, and
Yeah.
I think, but I try to be nice, but I do try to like share my passion for why not to do that though, because I feel like that's the other thing. I've not had all the same experiences you've had, although we've shared a few in kind of our careers. But when you're talking to people who really know the business or run the business, but maybe didn't come from the quantitative side,
Mm.
I feel like that's like the one thing that undermines a new analyst or a very smart like data resource is if they lead with sharing something trivial. The people who don't know that they're really smart are immediately skeptical, right? You talk
Yeah.
about Paris. It's like, because they understand, they're like, wait a second, does this person not understand,
Yeah.
this element? And then they're like, well, what else don't they understand? And then the whole thing is like, you're kind of fighting up this hill of credibility. And so I love it. I love emphasizing like, you got to share the truth. It's got to be useful. Feel free not to say anything until you've thought about those things.
And it weirdly it relates, I think, to the sort of the problem of how you structure data teams in relation to a business.
Mhm.
And I really want to write something on this. It might end up being a skit. But years ago, there was a chap called Jeremy Bullmore who was sort of quite famous in the advertising world, and he did this sort of skit about. I think it was. I can't remember if it was titled. I think it was called "How to Treat Your Agency."
Mhm.
But the way he did it was he flipped everything. So it was how not to treat your agency. And there was all the, brief them at the last minute, all these sorts of things. And I think one for data people would be quite good. Leave things till the last minute because they really don't like having too much time. Don't give them any context because they'd rather just work in a vacuum. And it's fine to say, "Can I have a run for this?" rather than explain what you're trying to achieve. And there are those sorts of things, and it often happens where you've got the data resource kind of centralized and then matrixed across. And it makes sense when people do that because they all go, "Oh, we have to have career ladders and we have to have ways of." I mean, you and I lived through this at Google with the, do the analytical consultants, or I can't remember what the US called them. It was slightly different, wasn't it? But do they ladder up through the sales people, or do they have a separate reporting structure? Oh, but the salespeople have to tell them what to do, so they should report to them. But then maybe we should give them a ladder or something. And people tend to go towards the sort of laddered approach because then it's easier in some ways to retain people like that. But I think it's a mistake because the people that you're working with never feel like you're with them. They just feel like you're sort of a bystander almost. So, my team at ITV is what you might describe. I've nicked this from Adam Heimlich, I think, but, is a forward deployed data science team.
Yeah.
So we sit in the sales org. We have the same bonus structures. We report up through the sales org, but within that we have a slightly more humane approach where the data people and the team are reporting to me,
Yeah.
and I know how to look after them in a way that maybe an out and out salesperson wouldn't. And that then means that they are kind of bathed in the realities of the business and of the advertiser. So it makes it harder, I think, to rock up with those true but dull bits of information because they've got a mental filter that they apply where they go, yeah, but okay, most people in pet food know that, or most people in sales know this. So I should subtract the known things and then see if anything left is interesting. And then you get to Twyman's law, which I'd always talked about this, but I didn't. Have you come across Tony Twyman?
Educate me.
Tony was very much a market researcher. And I think he's got a Wikipedia entry for this where he said something like, if it looks interesting, it's probably wrong. You've probably made a mistake, and that's a good instinct for data people to cultivate. So I haven't even finished the story. So where we overlapped was obviously Google, and I still remember, and we may come back to it, that talk you did and that on understanding auction mechanics and the kind of counterintuitive consequences, and it was just such an exciting thing to listen to and to think about, and to see the relationship between the kind of really deep maths of auction theory and the practical consequences. So then Google for a few years, and now past 5 years I've been at ITV, and in a way they all follow logically, and that my job here is to help TV show up with measurement of business impact in the near term. It's one of the things that the platform products are brilliant at doing, is that they, we've all met the people. They're built by these very earnest engineers who, mostly wouldn't know an advertiser if it came and bit them, but they're good at building these products, and they are
often fairly hostile to an ads. To
yeah,
be honest.
healthy tension, I think we call it. Yes.
Yeah.
And yet in the marketing world, there's all this sort of stuff about, oh, you're marking your own homework, and oh, you must be doing something, malicious or what have you. And just think, no, that's just not how these companies. I mean, yes, Meta has a track record of not being able to add up correctly, which has caused problems on occasion. And I'm not even.
Which has led to some awkward press conferences.
Yeah.
Hey, hold on. Quick check. These numbers are a little let's change. We'll send a note. Cheers.
Yes, we'll send a note. We'll do a blog post. We don't need to talk to people. We'll just do a blog post. Yeah.
Cover that in the blog.
Yeah. So there's those sorts of things, but even those, I think, mostly aren't. There's no intention there. I'm not going to go near the wider debate about the role of Meta in society. I don't feel like I'm qualified to talk about that.
And I would say, and this will come across extremely arrogant and wrong, but I will say it anyway. When I'm, especially for people who haven't, like, you've intersected at all these different areas on the business, media side, ad tech. When I tell people, I both met and know some of the most wonderful people I've ever met through some of the great work at say like Google, but I can't tell you how fantastically uneducated and not smart people are at these places. They don't know. They wouldn't even know. Trust me, they're not nefarious. They don't know how to be nefarious. They don't know much of anything. And it sounds super insulting to say that, but there's just so much more of, like, this is all so much bigger and more complicated than, being a great technologist is great. Being a great engineer is great. Building great tech, all these are wonderful tools. It does not make you in any way a pricing, a marketing, an advertising, a business strategist. It doesn't make it that at all. And yeah, I mean, certainly it's possible. And you mentioned the Meta case, and they're funny to laugh about these things. These are always mistakes.
Yeah.
That are just so incredibly bad that they're funny and can only be interpreted as like, oh my gosh, well, they must be trying to pull one over. And like the reality is almost always worse, where it's like, no, honestly, it's just not that as buttoned up as you think it is. And that's just the truth.
I know Dirk Nakbar, who still does a European data science role, and I think he was behind the early version of Meridian before it got taken on by even more serious technologists. And Dirk is utterly guileless. He would rather just wipe his entire laptop than do anything nefarious. Now, that is not to say that in the hands of salespeople that Meridian isn't a powerful way of influencing market mix models, and we should talk about this. I think because it is the way that MMM has become this kind of battleground is fascinating. And the
I
sort of
didn't
yeah.
expect, I mean, obviously, you know that, I mean, I do marketing measurement now, but I like every morning is a new package for me. I didn't realize so many people thought the enemy was each other's measurement approaches until apparently becoming in the industry now, and it is amazing to watch the tribal warfare. And sometimes I try to raise my hand from time to time and say, "Hey, I just want to like be very clear. This is all fascinating and all for us, but you realize no one knows or cares about anything that you're talking about." In terms of like we're hovering on the fringes of like, you know, the theory, you know, we're not like, can we just be reminded that like people might like watching this as theater, but like they're not helped by you guys arguing these details. They're helped
No.
by doing things that move the needle. And can we maybe just agree that as long as we're all trying to move the needle, we're probably doing good work? But if we're not trying to move the needle, and this isn't me to like accuse individual companies or people, but like feel like that's the bigger issue is when you start getting into these other uh I would call them pedantic arguments, but other people would call them, you know, take them very seriously. And I think yeah, MMM. There's others I've seen, by the way.
Yeah.
Who knew? Who knew? I guess I know now based on how people have used attribution, why people don't like attribution. But I find it fascinating the vitriol that comes out against people who want to like, who can like look at you know, have data on something and get an insight out of it. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know where you want to begin on this. I was way back before you talked about when we worked
Hmm.
together at Google. I wanted to throw in one other thing, which was you mentioned that you didn't know what they called us in the States. They called us analytical leads. And you might, I think our mutual friend Greg King, you
Yes.
might remember
Yeah.
Greg. So Greg and I used to love to joke. We call us analytical leads because analytical is not an English word, and it was the only way they could. They knew that the data team needed to be important, but they didn't know how to like kind of unofficially slide us. So they gave us a title that it wasn't a word.
Yes. Yes. Well, oh dear. I'm trying to think. There's bits I probably can't talk about. Do you have that same sense of, well, I signed something and it sounded quite scary at the time. There's probably stuff I can talk about, and there's stuff that maybe I'll just skip over for now.
Yeah. They've done a good job here. They've done a good job here of like for the most part, you know, you don't have
Yeah.
to worry too much about this, that, or whatever on former agreements based on
Yeah.
I think California said they're not going to enforce any of that stuff, but it doesn't matter.
Oh,
Um,
right. We're
I've got
going to law.
nothing bad to say. It's just
No,
fun.
no. As you
Yeah.
say, and I think this is where it goes. Is you know, exactly to your point. Let's think about the poor marketers in all of this.
Yeah.
You know, they don't want to listen to and adjudicate endless debates amongst different measurement people about different measurement techniques. They don't have that much time. They're trying to help the business grow or at least not die,
Mm-hmm.
and they want to know what they could be doing better. You know, those are all reasonable things to ask and to want. And it's what I love about what you're doing is that you're very much anchored in that kind of practice. It's back to this practical thing of, have you discovered something that rigorously means I should be doing something differently? Now, it might not be the nth degree of rigor, but it's enough. And is it taking into account all of the things that might cause me to make a mistake? Yes. Okay, great. So let's do that thing differently, and then let's observe and let's learn. And the lovely thing is that we can experiment with these things now much more easily than we could. The biggest break on experimentation, I think, is the advertiser. But
Mm-hmm.
you know, we can iterate in these things and try. Where I suppose, just to finish off on this is the longest introduction ever. I haven't.
Don't worry.
This is probably
Just
typical
wait
of
till
how
we
we
do
do.
our first question.
So yeah, the ITV work is, I suppose, it springboards off, you know, to another one of these measurement debates. There's a lot of people in telling you, oh, you have to think about the long term,
Mm-hmm.
and you have to think about the benefits that keep accruing to your business over months and maybe even years, and you just need to go and tell finance that. Well, yeah, I tried that, and they cut my budget. Didn't work
Yeah.
out so well.
Did
and
they
so
get to use the
yeah.
did they get to use the future money in the W-2?
Yeah, yes, that's right. Yeah,
Where did they
where is it? Is
put
it
the
in my
future
bank
money in your
account?
paycheck? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And and even things like, we've talked, oh, you can use discounted cash flow models, and that's okay because finance people understand that. It's like, yes, but for things like recurring revenue, not for something that you're essentially proposing as an article of faith.
Yeah. They're
Why
not.
when yeah.
Yeah. The credibility with finance, the issue with marketing, it's, we do this, I'll just editorialize and make your introduction even longer here for a second. I perceive a lot of what the knowledge is being shared about how, marketers can be more literate with finance is it's like you can kind of sum it up as to say, hey, marketers, there's such a thing as finance. Read these finance books, learn these finance terms, then finance people will like you. And as long as they like you, they'll do what you ask. And it's like, well, I'm sure the finance people appreciate that you've learned about their culture, their customs. It's like it's beautiful, I would say, cultural exchange, but I'm not sure they're going to feel any more confident about like so what they're trying to get through to you is that there's
Yeah.
only one thing that like you exist for one purpose, that is to have this business be bigger than it used to be. And all of the method that and by the way, when you do kind of break through the barrier with a finance person, they will eventually admit that they don't have the first clue about how to help grow that business. They know marketing's hard. That's why they got the heck out of that a long time
Yeah.
ago.
Yeah.
So they're willing to let you pretty much do everything, but if you can't like have a real conversation about like, well, ultimately we need to move these things in a certain period of time from a practical perspective, they find it like spacious, right? Like it's very tough to get, it doesn't matter if you change the ROAS number to adjusted for free cash flow or or what however you want to count. It's like you're putting my clothes on, but you don't know how to do like what I'm trying to do here. And I don't think it's bad to be literate. I just don't think that that's the point. That's not what finance people are asking you to do. They're okay translating
Yeah.
for you. They just want you to understand the problem.
Yes. And that, yeah, yes, cosplaying a finance person is not a strategy.
It's maybe not the way to get like, chummy. Uh,
Yeah. So there's the way that the evidence shows up in finance, and TV has historically just not showed up.
hmm
And so
hmm
the work that we're doing is about saying that yes, it is true that TV in the very short term, if you're looking at a single metric, does not pay back
Yeah.
in a lot of cases. Typically we're talking about MMMs. Most people who work in CPG, for example, have had the experience of going to a market mix debrief, and then the modeler will say, "Yes, so the return is zero point 0.7, so that's good." At which point the new marketer says, "Hang on a minute, that's less than one. So doesn't that mean I
hmm
lost money?" "Oh, yes, it's all right, but we just multiply it by three." "Sorry, what?"
Walk me back there, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Multiply by three. Yeah, yeah. It's an industry norm. We take all this long-term stuff and we just bring it in. Is it any wonder that the finance people are not giving you time in their diary, and don't want to talk to you, if you're doing things like that? And so you've got that tension, which is that if we go too short-term, then the medium looks bad. And obviously, I sit in the medium, and whilst I am very keen to be dispassionate, that is something I need to think about. But then in the long term, we're all dead, as Kane said, and
Yeah.
we can't just let it run on. So where we're headed, I think, is this kind of near term incrementality piece. And
hmm
I think that's where you got the platforms are sort of climbing out of the bottom of the funnel, if you like, and
hmm
away from attribution and away towards automation, which frankly in some cases has a better understanding of people than the people do.
hmm
And we should definitely talk about that because that is fascinating. And with telly, what we're trying to do is say, okay, we'll show you how TV shows up in the near term, and we'll show you across multiple metrics because it's the kind of medium that causes lots of ripples in different areas. And so our thesis is if we can measure those ripples in a scalable way rather than just measure the audience, then we can help the marketers, because then it's a fairer debate, if you like, about where is the value creation happening for my business from marketing,
Mm-hmm.
and therefore which bits of marketing should I spend more or less money on? And I probably would say, having said everything about the platforms not being malign in their measurement products, I probably would say that certainly in the UK, things have maybe gone too far the other way. In that, if you said, I don't have really good evidence for this, but if I had to guess, I would say that the share of money going to different media channels in the UK isn't aligned to the share of value creation. And so getting to a point where we can all have conversations about that is about telly showing up rather than just lecturing people harder about why they're wrong and why
Yeah.
they need to think about the long term, and just telling marketers that they're doing it wrong. I just think is so arrogant and so unhelpful when they are just trying to keep things going in a difficult business climate, because it always is and has been for
Mm-hmm.
100 years, and it's just not helpful. So the thesis of what we're doing is to try and meet them, more than halfway, and so far it's going quite well. And we've managed to get all the UK broadcasters to talk to each other
Yeah.
and agree that this is what we need to do. Because in the past, the deal was very different. The deal was that we would pay as the broadcasters for the audience measurement, and then you as the advertiser would be your problem to figure out the relationship between the reach of an audience and the business impact. And if you want to pay a market mix modeling person to do that, great, but not our problem. We sold you a bag of eyeballs. That sounds slightly gruesome, doesn't it? And whether those eyeballs do anything for your business is entirely your problem. And I just don't think that's okay anymore. And luckily, my boss and my boss's boss and a lot of people in the UK industry also think that now. So we've
Mm-hmm.
got quite a good mandate for change, which is exciting.
Effective, like if you get it right, if you're not Samir, who I would very much trust, but really anybody in this position, right? If you're a measurement or data resource and you are like in the field, you're either at the agency world or in the advertising, channel space. If you're doing it right, it means that if they listen, your clients do better, they grow, you're going to get more ad dollars. It's a wonderful thing.
Yeah.
You mentioned like, our time together. Like when I was at Google, when we first met, when I was doing that course, I don't think I ever told you this, but that all my participation in that entire process, I won't get into my own personal career existential things, but there were basically it was sort of this, hey, I had some time on my hands, or they were kind of looking at me to do something with some time that I had on my hands. And so I was like, well, I have this thing that keeps happening on the parts of the business that I've been a part of, which is the closer we get down to like what the truth is, and we get some, not trivia, but something useful in front of some people and they do an action on it, turns out they always get really happy and their numbers, like the clients have done a lot better. I've been on these teams repeatedly. The techniques I'm not hearing about here at Google. I'm not hearing people talk about the way we've gone about it. I don't know if I'm doing it right or if I'm following the
Yeah.
playbook or whatever. But I feel like I want to tell someone about this idea that like it turns out if they do better, my bonuses are really good. Like I've been doing really well in my numbers, and so it's a more winding way to tell the story. But that's how I got even interested in even sharing anything in the first place. So I was just so like, and I was maybe blessed from that outsider perspective of, I kind of now technically my first job was in marketing. If we want to go way back to when I worked in education, but ultimately my introduction to this space was really that experience at Google, and so I hadn't had a lot of preconceived notions about how stuff should work. I knew what I was trained to see. I knew how to, like, I was told to think about it. But beyond that, I didn't really have a lot of like, I wasn't the most well-read, marketing econometric person. I know I hadn't like built up that repository of insight, and weirdly, and I would almost encourage everyone, this is not on topic, but I would say like if you feel like a imposter or an outsider in any role, just realize that it gives you a bit of a superpower of like you're just sort of
Yeah.
able to ask questions that everyone else feels too, would be too stupid to ask. But I had that on my side for so long. And
And I would say the education element, I didn't know that about you, but that,
yeah.
I still remember you guiding us through that material. And there was one thing you said, and I probably say this to people most months, if not most weeks, at
Hmm.
ITV, which is you've got to remember that the sort of the spectrum of price is completely flipped. And you said something like, the first click you buy will be the cheapest you'll ever buy.
Hmm.
And at the time, my head just did somersaults. I wait, what? Hang on, how? Why would that? Oh, okay. And then the next one and the next one, and the next one. Eventually, you hit diminishing returns, which
Yeah.
is the complete reverse of the way that a reach-based medium thinks about this. So, if you go on to our buying platform for ITVX, thing called Planet V, and if you tick all the boxes, I want left-handed golfers who eat fish on a Friday and like soft cheese, whatever. I don't know. There's a million and
Yeah.
one things you could pick. You get it all the way down to one person that you're targeting. That will be an incredibly expensive impression because from our point of view, because we've sold everyone and then gone narrow by exception, and because audiences in many ways are not, this is an awful thing you have to tell audience measurement people. It's like, yeah, you think that everyone's using your currency because it's true. No, they're not. They're,
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
the broadcaster case, we're using it for price discrimination. You want to be in the football? Great. You've got to be targeting 16/24s.
Yeah.
But other people watch the football. Yeah, yeah, we know, but whatever. That's what you got to do because that attracts a higher price. So
Yep.
it's a way of kind of managing demand. And for us, targeting therefore is, the more targeted you go, the more expensive you get. And I keep on saying, no, no, no. In an auction world or in a kind of incrementality world, you've got to flip your mental model because you start when the machinery starts to work, the first people you get are the easiest people, and then it gets harder.
Hmm. Well,
And
and
that is a
remember too
big,
on the
yeah,
auction any system where prediction is going on, which is like a digital,
yeah,
click-based system, right? There, it's not to say that that first impression didn't cost a lot. It's that remember they can pay you in intent, and that's what you can't like. You're intervening on TV. You can't like the 18 to 24-year-old person can't pay you in their interest. But that's absolutely what you can do. Like that's exactly how it works, right? On
yeah,
the digital auctions, right? They're paying you with a like, oh yeah, that is nice. I'll click on that, right? Okay, cha-ching. I earned my my first as you mentioned my first click, which is often yes the cheapest you'll ever buy.
yeah.
Fascinating. Yeah, I love it. It's great for me to hear too because I think I'm sure all of us who've seen different parts of the ecosystem wonder, how does this part of marketing think about this? Or, oh, here's this insider on price or value or demand, they're getting this, but they're not getting that. Like, why don't they get that? And I think you bring up a great point of like, these things are different. There's very different dynamics.
Yeah.
Um, you could bring the same information to an audience, and depending on how they're trained to think about it or they have to think about it, it might mean very different things. So it's never wrong to take a step back and say, okay, let me unpack why is this a recommendation, right? Another thing you said earlier, I just want to get to this before I forget because I keep
Mm.
putting a pin in it. I love your point about not lecturing to marketers or like this idea that like if we're really going to move the needle, is that is it's probably not the approach. Honestly, so at Bonsai, you know, I like to say we're in bed with business, not with advertising. And so the bad part about that, right, is that, well, to be, if doing this is as hard as we all say it is, and marketing is extremely hard, that
Mm.
by definition, most things can't work.
Yeah. Yes.
It
Yes.
can't, it
If it
can't
was
be true
easy,
that like
everybody would be doing
everything
it.
you're
Yeah.
trying is doing
Yeah.
great, and this is also the hardest thing anyone can do. And so now when you put the data in that way, what could it look like? It can look very much like, oh, there's a company out there that just tells me everything I do is wrong. And not popular, right? And like I think about that all the time of like that's not what we're trying to do at Bonsai. That's also not what I think anyone with truth at the core of what they're doing in data is trying to do. But oftentimes telling the truth
Yeah.
means making this story feel like we're telling this like combative story. And I I think we still struggle with how to do this well, but I think the intent of showing more truth is to not talk about all the 80% of the things that are failing because no, like, dude, you're fine. Like no one cares. 80% of stuff will be not work how
Yeah.
you want, but like it needs to be a bigger deal when something works. It needs to be a bigger deal when something works. It needs to be a bigger deal when, in your case, when ITV's advertisers are seeing business growth. It needs to not just be like, oh, okay, well, that's great. Well, 10 people said that everything worked last month, so put another one in the list, and add a little 5% to the budget, right?
Yeah.
No, 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 no. You're gonna lose the thread here. Now that means like making it, how do you make these real wins more differentiated? Well, it means you have to have a more honest perspective on what's really going on. And so I always say like I judge anyone, in the space, not on the degree and statistics that they have or in the method they use for prediction, but the intent behind it. It's like, are you
Yeah.
trying to tell them the truth or are you trying to tell them a story? And if you're trying to tell them a story that starts with like, well, I want to tell you something good, it's tough for me to get on board with that. Not because I don't love good stories, but because I know you're going to hide something they need to hear.
Yeah. No, I think that's very, and that was an interesting element. I have to say that the sales team at ITV, you would think, fairly traditional TV sales team would not be supportive,
Hmm.
and actually they've been incredible.
Awesome.
And the way it's played out, the bit where they got nervous, first time you're doing a debrief with some bracing news.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, but can we make it look a bit better? I know it was what it was.
That's what it
We've
was.
thought about the methodologies. We've done our homework. We've done all the checks. We've consulted Twyman's law. And now we have to give you this debrief and have this conversation, and we've thought about what to do next and so on. And every time it plays out, well, I mean, I'm always slightly nervous because I want to help them, but this is me helping them. And we'll go to the meeting, we'll go through all of it, and then there'll be this pause as the marketer digests. And he goes, okay, so what are we going to do next? We're going to do this, and we're going to try this. And then there's this sort of sense of relief from the salesperson because they're like, oh, that was like really bracing news. And yet they're not saying, TV is henceforth cast into the outer darkness. I never want to see you again. They're saying, okay, let's work to make it better.
Hmm.
And that is just such a lovely feeling because it means that we've done our job in terms, there's always a degree of suspicion. Well, you're from the TV, you're from the broadcaster. Of course, you're going to say it was good.
Yeah.
And we do a lot of work, with the methodologies, with all of the stuff, just like you do, to really be careful. And then when you get to those sorts of conversations, it's just lovely. And it's that, in a weird way, it's a bit like, I mean, when I was working in agencies, although increasingly the incentives are more nuanced and complicated, at the time it was very much the client's paying you to do stuff, you do stuff to make their business better.
Hmm.
And there's something refreshingly simple about that.
Hmm.
It is, oh, I work for you. Okay, good. Let me try and help you then. And that's, you talk about being in bed with business rather than with marketing. I think that's exactly the right spirit. And it's where you see it particularly, I think, at the moment, is these sorts of, small, medium-sized businesses who are, trying to grow from nothing. And they go on that sort of typical journey of, okay, we'll start with Meta, we'll grow as much as we can, we'll use images from the catalog or the site or whatever. And then, oh, this YouTube thing, that's a bit scary. We've got to have moving images now. How do we do that? Oh, okay.
Oh, yeah.
That's another, achievement unlocked.
We did
You
that
then
one.
do
We'll be
some-
back.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And then, we come a bit later in that journey. And I say to an advertiser like this, yeah, we've run some tests on your creative. Honestly, we don't think you should give us any money right now.
Yeah.
Go back to YouTube, go back to the nursery slopes, and keep going until you've got better communication, because at the moment you'd be wasting your time and money.
Yeah.
And that the counterintuitive joy of someone at ITV saying, "Yeah, go and do it on YouTube," I just like, because it's another way of underlining our credibility, but also it means that by the time they come back to us, they're in a better position. And
Yeah, because
those
you can't, you're not going to get great studies from bad advertisers on your
no,
platform. It's just the reality. So to be, put our, kind of incentives hat on, right? It's like, yeah, you need them to do a good job,
yeah,
and it doesn't help you. Great, we got this business that's not ready for this. We got the contract, but they're not going to be back. Or, this we can't put this on the website, right? Like you're in the business of telling these great stories, and yeah, I mean that's exactly the right way to do it. I think so. I'm going to actually get to this list of questions right now, but I had one
okay,
more. But I had one more thought to build on your point, because I think it's such a good point. Let's see where I the way I've started to think about it, or maybe say it more, is it's circling all the way back to like not lecturing to marketers. I think it's okay to say out loud the like sort of universal truth that we do agree. We want marketers to have more resources. We want them to get bigger budgets, to be more important, to have better say. They're critical to growth. They define growth in almost every place. And so they are underfunded, they are underrepresented. It's not where you way more often see problems because there wasn't enough good marketing, not because they did too much bad marketing. And so in that world, it's like, we're team marketer, we're here to get you the bigger budget. I think we've all I don't think we started this, or I don't know who started this, but I think it's fair to say there's so much effort, and so many smart people are devoted to then trying to, okay, like, we know, like, getting the win was great, let's use it to get more marketing to grow this business further. And finance historically gave 10% of the company's revenue to marketing. If we tell this great story, they're coming on board, they're gonna give us 13% or 15%, or they're gonna grow it. And yes, that's a good remit, and it should continue to some degree, but it misses another opportunity, which is, if you can, right, using the same information, if whether or not the finance guy believes you, if you've moved the business forward and the business is bigger, guess what? You've got a bigger marketing budget, because 10% of a bigger company is more money.
yeah,
So it's just sort of like being okay with that too, of like, yes, let's tell great stories, but also let's move the needle, and then let's do both. And guess what? Like, telling the truth is also team marketing. It hasn't always been dressed up that way. And the emphasis is more on that side of it, and maybe less on the sort of advocacy side of it. So yeah, I don't know. I love what you're doing. I won't get into the TV versus digital question that I had, because I feel like we've covered that one, but
yeah.
you did kick this off with talking about being useful, and I gotta take this whatever direction you want, but
Okay.
either one marketing metric or marketing type or measurement type, like, what's something that people are obsessing over right now that is absolutely not useful?
I was thinking about this one. It's a weird. I mean, there's so many candidates to choose from in a way, but then it slightly takes us back into that. Oh, well, they're using the wrong metric, and if they use this
Mm.
other one, I I'm gonna go for a kind of meta bad habit, and this will sound odd, but a lot of the orthodoxy in the training is exactly what you say, which is focus on one metric.
Hmm.
And yet there are lots of reasons in organizations, whether you think about the psychology of organizations, or you think about the way that people game metrics once they've got them, the ways that most metrics have flaws in them. Actually looking at a basket of measures, I would argue, is a better way to do it. And yet the sort of all the training materials will say to you, no, 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 And partly this is a sort of drawdown from the statistics, which will say, well, you can't shop around for results after the fact.
Yeah.
And there is a bad strain of that where, okay, this was meant to improve awareness, but instead it improved perception. So we'll say that that's what we were going to do all along, because at least something went up. And that I totally get is bad, and that's a bad reason to use multiple metrics, because you're, in the stats terms, you're sort of changing your hypotheses or whatever. But at the same time, what we've found with what we're doing is, even something as simple as a good quality modern regional test or geo experiment. When you do that, if you do it multi-outcome, so you say, okay, let's get the footfall numbers, let's get the web visits, let's get the sales value, let's go and pay for an upweight to the brand tracking survey, and even get a measure of awareness that is robust down to region level, DMA in your world, or kind of county or thereabout, TV region in ours. And when you do that, you get a really lovely chart, which is, okay, here is a lift in all of these things, most of which are things that your finance colleague really cares about too, and understands the value of. And at that point, it's just much less of a worry, because you're not sort of stressing about, this metric or that metric. You're looking for a broader impact. I don't know if this is, I hope this isn't a cop out.
I love this answer. I love this answer
Yeah?
because it's
Okay.
so, I love that, this campaign's meant to drive intent. And it's so funny because, again, we're talking about influencing customers in a market. These are these dynamic things.
Yeah.
Isn't it amazingly arrogant to think how we know something's going to like specifically affect that dynamic? Right? It's like, okay, yeah, but maybe the ad generates more interest and awareness. Maybe it drives people. Maybe there's a reason that's moved the needle on, purchase decision. Maybe it's done all these other things. So like, how many missed opportunities have been there because a strategy has worked, looking at the basket of like, hey, the goal here for everything is grow the business. Let's just stop it there. Here are things that we know need to happen. And if it's working, right, across either all of them or a basket, that's amazing. That can be all you need to evolve and like utilize this in your strategy. But if we have this like we've predetermined how we think this is going to work and it's going to be in this way, and we didn't see it, it's like, well, not only is that like presupposing a lot of things that you have no idea that that's how it's really going to work, but probably on a practical side, the worst thing is that, God forbid, it actually works, and then you thought it didn't because it didn't work in the way you want it.
Yeah. And it's that sort of folk theory that people have in their heads, that they think they have a good theory of growth, and actually they may very well not. I suppose the other one I would add as a sort of meta observation about the handling of metrics is people ignoring the negatives. And so what I mean by that, there are bits where, and I mean this more specifically, they're kind of generic, oh, you should learn from failure. But a lot, I don't know, I suspect that when a new business comes to Bonsai and engages with you, I would guess that a lot of the early wins come from you identifying and triaging things that are just bad, things that are actively a waste of money and that you shouldn't be doing. And some of that comes from excluding certain excluding talking to existing customers or whatever. There's lots of tactical ways that plays out. But quite often, just not doing dumb things can get you a long way, and yet we're sort of chasing the lift and the positivity. Let's just get the house in order first, not do it, and within that's not easy to do, because within that you've then got to take advantage of the current set of technologies, and that's where, and this would be a fun thing to talk about actually, because I'd love your view on that. That's where the humans can sometimes get in the way. I remember years ago, this chap at Mindshare Tim, he had a side hustle, a business selling water bottles, and he's done really well now. It's now his full-time job, and it's a really well-known brand in the UK. And I remember going up to Tim and saying, "So Tim, you use these platform products for your side hustle as well as for your day job. What's the difference?" And this is, bear in mind, this is a good 10 years ago.
Hmm.
And he said, "Well, it's funny, Samir. When I'm doing it for my own stuff, I turn on every bit of automation I can because it turns out those automations are really quite good. And
Hmm.
so I make a lot more money. Whereas in my day job, I'm having to argue over, every keyword or every box that I tick for an additional audience or subtracting an audience. And everyone thinks they know, and they think they know which words they should be going after, and they think they know what they should be selecting, and they think that Google's ripping them off, and therefore that they have to, you know, carefully choose every single one, and they just end up causing themselves more trouble. Whereas I just flick it all to auto, and it's really good. And there's this bit where it's back to the sort of crawling out of the bottom of the funnel. It's this, the machines are now. There's lots of hand wringing at the moment about, oh, they'll never be creative like me, and I'm a human, and I'm amazing. Well, yes, sure, in some ways, but there are some things that humans are really bad at,
Hmm.
and weirdly, judging risk is one of them.
Judging risk.
That's why. That's why we're all
Bad for
scared when we
data.
read the
Bad,
newspapers. Sorry.
bad for data people, by the way. It turns out people are really terrible with percentages.
Yes.
But that's a separate. We will not talk about that today. But yeah, so bad with risk,
Yeah.
bad with percentages. Bad. Gosh. Well, you want my take on automation and how to. So here, I'll give you the shortest answer, which is, for me, it's people don't. An automation algorithm formula, ML, whatever, all that stuff. If your problem is to solve a million little decisions, you want an automation. If you've got other problems like make one big giant decision, please, a person, please have a person do it. That's it. Like that's my
Yeah.
biggest point of view. I think most people, you talk about like the hyper, like, oh, this keyword or this whatever, is that people don't, because we don't train, like the orthodoxy isn't what I would call like tech first, in the sense of like what are even these systems, like what is a Instagram, like how does this thing even work? And it's not intuitive. It's not like I can tell you how a billboard works and none of us need an explanation. It's up in the air, something's on it. That's the end of the billboard. Like there's no more, that the training. So we don't need, so we can get into like, but digital systems are just very different. And I just think people are just like a general long-term lack of awareness of like, this system is not what you think it is. It's not like
Yeah.
this one decision or that one decision. This is simply a system that has billions of little decisions going on all the time, that you never need to get that right of an answer at any one point. But if you can be slightly more right than you're wrong over a broad period, you're going to be, wowed by what happens. But that's not how we explain it. That's not how it kind of stuns us. Like, what do you mean? Like, what do I do with all of these practices I've learned based on like making these big decisions? And that's like, don't worry about them. Um, they're not what you think. No, there are things you need to go do, and they're very different things. And I'm not saying
Yeah.
there's not work to do, but it's just like the work itself is very different. And that's how I see all these systems, frankly.
Yeah, no, I like that take because it's you do see these, on LinkedIn. I'll see these sorts of search performance marketing sort of, I don't know what to call them, enthusiasts who will just be really angry all the time. I mean, it must be exhausting. They're angry about everything that Meta or Google do. Oh, they've done this in PMax, and oh, they've done this, and oh, they're hiding my visibility. They're taking away visibility of my campaigns. But they're all based on again, like the other ones we were talking about. They're all based on these folk theories that are probably wrong.
Probably wrong.
And rather than worrying about all of those, all that minutiae, and look, I get it. To some extent, that's what pays their mortgage, and that's a sort of thing that focuses the mind, and so you want to defend the way that things were. I remember years ago, again, saying this is a long time ago, saying to the global someone in the global search team at Mindshare, so you can see where this is going, right? Because it's
Yeah.
going to be focused on intent, and actually intent can be expressed through many words. And you look at what Meta have done, and they don't make you type in words for interests. They just bring it up to the level of interests, because machine learning is a good thing. And so you can see a path to Google doing the same thing. And he looked at me, and he just went completely pale, and he said, and he did say verbatim, but that's what pays my mortgage.
Yeah. But what do I do? So
Yeah.
I have a story I can tell you off recording that I'll tell you that very much we were living through one of these
Yeah.
stories, and it's a fantastic success story, and it's kicking off all of these like, but what do I do now questions. Back to your point about the enthusiasts and the hand wringing and like the energy put into like fighting against this. I so I agree. I find ironic though is that the systems they're criticizing, the automations and all that stuff they're criticizing. By the way, these tools are not above reproach and deserve a lot of
Oh,
criticism. These are the
yeah.
wrong. I find it like so sad that these are the wrong criticisms completely. We won't go on. I know we're almost, we're blowing through this hour and a half, but like it's yeah, there's a lot of things wrong with, I don't know how much you want to get into like specific examples. I know that Meta's got ASC and Google's got PMax and there's other examples, but yeah, these ad platforms are out there a lot of times trying to monetize automations, running auction media on impressions that have no auction. Good luck. Like good luck growing your revenue there. Good luck making that a good user experience. Good luck. And I'm not even sure the people there even completely understand what they've built and why there's ways to improve upon it, right? Like there are absolutely real criticisms with like how to make these things better. They're not but it took my toy away, or but I
Yeah.
thought about this, or but I want to do that. It's like that's a complete, like honestly, you're making the argument worse because you're kind of missing the underlying truth of that these things are database systems that require millions of little decisions, not one big one.
Yeah.
Um, all right, so I know you're prepped with a whiteboard. I don't know if we'll use it today. I do want to ask you, um, okay, so we've asked like what's wrong with some of these things in the industry. Maybe let's take the other direction. You know, you're building it can be ITV, it could be whatever. Like you're building like the dream marketing analytics tool or dashboard for 2030, right? Uh, what's on it? What are you putting on that? What are you taking off of what is on today, and what are you putting on that tool and why?
Okay. So the few, I suppose, maybe start with a general dashboarding principle, which in a way comes back to the sort of true but dull and false but interesting map, if you like, or two by two. Is that, and I know you think about this a lot. Just putting some numbers onto a screen in a graph does not make it a dashboard. The dashboard in your car is there for some very specific reasons, largely to stop you dying. And so it has evolved over time, along with the control surfaces of the car, to encourage continued life. And so knowing how fast you go is a really important thing.
Yeah.
And knowing the revs of the engine when you had engines was a thing that you might need to know about, because you could damage your car. Those are two good things to know. There's a bunch of other stuff that is explicitly not there. It is not wired in, it is not showing up. So just saying, well, I've put some numbers here in a thing, that makes it a dashboard. Well, no, it doesn't, because I mean, in a way, the theme of what we've been talking about is you need to have an underlying theory of what does and doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
And without that, it is just some numbers. But numbers plus a theory can start to get you to some sense of what you should be focusing on and what matters. So I suppose I'd have that as a kind of general pointer. You know, designing a dashboard is not so much about the look and feel of it and the sort of, you know, yes, you can worry about your car dashboard and do I do miles per hour or kilometers per hour? Do I do both? Do I have a illuminated needle or not? Sure. Go for your life. Do all of that if you want. But just think first of all, what is the equivalent of speed in this context? And you know, speed is a derived measure. It's a derivative. It's a function of change of something over time. And so then where you get to is what are the models, I think, that sit under the dashboards, and that's the interesting bit. Is what have you modeled away because of your theory or your kind of understanding of what things matter, to remove all the noise, remove the bits that you can't do anything about, and leave you with some clarity. So people talk a lot about data-driven marketing, and I absolutely hate that phrase.
Amen.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Oh my gosh. I literally have a slide. This is unrelated, but we have a meeting later today, an internal thing, but we have this, you know, and it's a slide made by me, so it's an ugly slide. But just reminding people, data doesn't make decisions, people do.
Yes. And it's so important. You know, if it was that easy, and if the numbers could tell you what to do, then why are you even there? Why do you have a job? You know, it doesn't make any sense. Now, model supported conversations.
Yeah.
I am there for. I remember an old boss of mine. He's kind of like the Yoda of marketing analytics, I would say. He would resent that description, not least because he's much taller than Yoda. But anyway, years ago, I remember him saying to me, yes, I'd done something. I'd built a model and I'd done some analysis on the back of the model and went to him and he looked at me and said, yes, well done, Samir. You've learned that you need to cube the model, not cube the data. Like, what? Cube the model, don't cube. I do not understand, but you seem to think that's what I've done. And like most of the things that he's said to me over the years, it's only a couple of years later that the pennies dropped and I go, oh yes, because if I cube the model, then the model has done the work of stripping out all of the noise and the stuff that I don't need to know and focuses on the relationships that matter. And by cubing that, I can explore that space, which is a better space to explore because I'm less likely to do something silly or wrong because I'm looking at some raw numbers, you know, and that I think is quite a wise. So in a way, the dashboard is a consequence of the learning and the modeling that you've done rather than the place to start.
I love
that said. Sorry,
I love that. I just love the image of the car dashboard. I think that's it's a great prompt for people as we're thinking about building like what these things should look like. I love that because you're giving me so many nuggets here. You gave me the data-driven like rant, which, you know, by the way, as an aside, I always, you know, like people tried out data-driven as like oftentimes like a CV, right? Like, oh, you know, let me show you my credentials of data-driven. And I always like the thing I tell people or advise them on if they start explaining themselves that way, I'm like, you know, do you think Stephen King calls himself a great storyteller? Or
yes,
it implicit?
Yeah.
Nice, maybe the most prolific author of our time, right? Like he doesn't need to tell you he's a great storyteller. It's implicit in, you know, so great data people don't have to tell you, right? So just buyer beware on that, right? Back to the yeah, go ahead.
That's a lovely pattern because it crops up in lots of places. In fact, weird aside, we haven't talked about it. You know, I was having this bizarre conversation with Claude, and it was trying to distill something about my writing, and it came up with a phrase. And I said what strategists have said since time immemorial, which is, would anybody say the opposite? If they wouldn't say the opposite, then you are not making a choice. You know, if you wouldn't say that I'm a numbers free marketer, then you haven't said anything.
Yeah.
and it's that test is actually quite a good test, which is
I
would
love
you
that. Yeah,
say
I
that?
love
Yeah,
that. I love that test. I love the car dashboard idea.
yeah,
I think what's resonating to me about that as a model is, yes, the car, the dashboard, it's here. What is the goal? Well, the goal is to I get in the car. The goal is to get where I'm going
yeah.
without dying, right?
Yes.
If I've gotten to where I need to go and I haven't died, I've succeeded. And I think that is, as the business marketing, whatever we're talking about, that dashboard, we're just trying to achieve our business objective without going out of business. If if what you have on that is helping us get to those aims, it's probably fine. It's probably great.
And it doesn't mean it's easy. I mean, that's
No, 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 my
what I love
God.
about the work that you're doing is that it's, to solve the, okay, let's milk this analogy a bit more. To have a successful readout of speed, having decided that you think speed is an important thing,
Yeah.
you then have to have something a machine that can essentially differentiate. And then you've got to think about, what sort of time windows is it differentiating over, and how will it behave in the different failure modes that exist? What will it do when one of the car's wheels is off the ground, or all of that thought has gone into kind of safety engineering in cars over decades. And yet, in the marketing world, it feels like we're still floundering around with, people walking in front of the cars with flags and that sort of stuff, rather than thinking, okay, because there's so much of this stuff has not been visible and not been measurable, which I guess gets you. So I will actually now try and answer your question. So, yeah, I just apologies to whoever is trying to edit this.
No worries. Yeah. No, it's
And thank
fine.
you
They
for,
have nothing better to do.
So what I'm trying to get to for telly is three related things. The first thing I want is a more kinetic measure, let's call it real time, why not, of ratings of the audiences. And that's not because I think that audience first thinking is the right way to go. One of the things we haven't talked about yet is another counterintuitive thing in digital marketing is these days you will have people start on Meta and they start with completely open targeting. They come with no prejudices at all, and they plug in the outcome variable, whatever it is, the API, and they say, right, go forth, Meta, Google, TikTok, and find what works, and then come back and tell me when you have. I am not going to kind of hamstring you by giving you my prejudices about audience. So there's a whole sort of, there's a way in which kind of audience first thinking can limit you, because we forget that an audience was only ever a hypothesis. It was just a hypothesis about what might work better than talking to everybody with a pulse. And you might have been right and you might not. So I know it's weird, but my first thing would be a real-time measure of audience. Partly because, so this is, I suppose this flips the analogy now. By putting a different thing on the dashboard, I make the engineers have to do something different behind the scenes. So this is a bit weird if you're, for people who don't have a background in TV measurement. Maybe if I just do a layup first. So
Yeah.
we talked earlier about how the audience measurement system was the thing that we invested in.
Yes.
And because this was a contested set of numbers between buyers and sellers, and the buyers don't want to get ripped off and the sellers want to get fair amounts of money, there was a lot of pressure on the measurement geeks in the middle from both sides. And they were told, in no uncertain terms, you have to make it accurate. And it has to be reliable and dependable and transparent and all these good things that we're supposed to want, like motherhood and apple pie. And so they felt this pressure for many, many years, for decades, really. And so we now have a world where we have these incredibly expensive panels, where we have some really complicated weighting processes on top of those, and some algorithms that are not always designed actually to be spot on, but to be consistent, because What you don't want for a currency number is for it to be one thing on a Monday and another thing on a Tuesday. That's not good. Currency fluctuation is bad, and so we've ended up in this world where their value system is about the quality of measurement. But in the meantime, what's happening is the tail of the distribution of viewing is becoming bigger and bigger, and there are fewer and fewer things that a panel-based system can actually measure. And so you have this debate. There was a conference called ASI, which happened in Copenhagen this year, and there was an awful lot of hand wringing in this audience with people saying, "Oh, audience measurement has to be about beautiful, high quality, stratified sampling panels with amazing weighting layers on top derived from an establishment survey that's also very expensive because it has to be right. We have to count correctly. And don't be coming at me with any of that dirty, large-scale device-based data, because that's just impressions. It's not people. And how dare you? My panel is beautiful and made by unicorns." And that is honestly the subtext version of the debate that is happening.
Yeah.
And yet you or I would look at that and go, well, hang on a minute. At some point, I've already got like 7 screens in this room.
Yeah.
We're going to get to a point where we can't do it that way, either in terms of the devices or in terms of the viewing patterns and so on. So the reason for me saying my first block of my 3-block dashboard, and I promise there is an answer hiding under here somewhere, is real-time audience measurement. Because what that does is it immediately changes the brief to the engineers, because what they have to do is then think, okay, right, I need to do something different. I need all of those tellies, and I need all of them to phone home and tell me what they're watching. And then I need some sort of machine learning model on top of that that makes a reasonable prediction of what my fancy schmancy audience measurement panel thing will tell me a week later. Because I know, dear listeners, I know it seems incredible, but people wait weeks, if not months, for some of their TV reporting to come through. Oh, yeah. And for a digital marketer, that's just like, what?
In the US, we wait 5 days for our checks to clear and 90 days for our impressions to come back. So
it's all so ridiculous. So we've got these very delayed measures. So by saying my first block is real-time audience reporting, is that because I really care about the audiences in a future where we're buying on outcomes? No, but there's a transition that this industry has to go through, and by valorizing a real-time, let's go back to speed.
I love it. What you're reminding me of is this thing I loved learning at the talk that I heard it at. It's terrible because I forget the speaker, and he did a great job. But he talked about how do you get people doing the right things through change management, and he talked about this idea of familiar but different. And you're talking audience right now as block 1. Yeah. To me, it's like, well, audience is familiar.
Yes.
So we're gonna get to where we need to get to on outcomes, but I'll help you get started with something we both understand, which is this. And just is like the way I'm hearing your explanation of kind of that establishment system is, historically, or I guess now, we still have these incredible tools that can measure, that can answer a question with a ton of precision. That's just completely the wrong question now. And as you're talking about real time, or the proliferation of all this stuff, it's just the question is just very different. We need to maybe precision on all this stuff isn't really the key, but like a much more interesting question needs to be asked, which is like, how do we get our hands around like this very complicated bifurcated attention economy and audience economy in a way that, and how do we get people like something useful fast, right?
Yeah, no, that's a lovely way to think about it. It is. I hadn't thought about it like that. It's bringing people with us towards the right hand bit of this sort of imagined dashboard, but giving them something that's it is exactly that, familiar but different. So this is the audience stuff that you know and love. These are the kind of the weird blocky buying audiences. There's a whole other thing there. I'm going to try. I'm trying to stay. I'm going to finish the
2 more blocks to go, Samir, and then I'll let you.
2 more blocks. Okay, I can do it. Come on.
Do it.
So the second block is I want this to be something that is near real time lift. And that's all chosen quite carefully, again, to influence the engineering behind it. So it's like I'm sketching the ideal dashboard. So the first thing I want to know is how fast I'm going. And I want to know how fast I'm going now, not last week. So that would be good. So the second thing is I want lift. I want some sort of real-time lift. And so the easiest way of thinking about this is if I've got millions of TVs that are sending me data on their viewing, and I can also match. I mean, it's embarrassing. It's 2025. IP matching still works. Should it? No, but it does. And I can do some sort of lift measurement against that. Pretty crude, but I don't want to do attribution, kind of straight attribution. So I'll have some kind of control group in there, and I can do real time or near real time lift to web traffic. So the second thing you get as an advertiser is you can, and because I've done this on the same system, the cute thing is I can split that by the same audiences. So if you are the marketer that happens to believe that you are really doing audience targeting when you buy TV, spoiler alert, you're not, then you can look at it that way. And what it will teach people over time is they'll go, oh, right, so I can click the drop down for 16 to 34s because that's what that campaign was bought against. But there's all these 55 pluses, but they seem to be doing something. I thought I wasn't targeting them. Wait, oh no, I get them for free because it's telly. And actually the lift is about the same. Maybe I need to think about my audience thinking. Maybe I'm wrong. Audience is a hypothesis, right? So you've
right?
got evidence
Audience
there.
is who I am, tells you a lot about my intent, but that's not the only thing that tells you about my intent. There's
No.
other things, right?
Absolutely. So that's the second block. And you could stop there. You could say, okay, we've done enough. We've inflicted a lot of change on this industry. Let's just leave it there. But no, there's a third bit that we want, and this is where I do actually think some kind of hybrid measurement is useful. And we might, I don't know if we've talked, we might disagree on this. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
So the thing that we're building is this thing called Lantern. And part of Lantern is a sort of this real-timey bit with tags and stuff that we all understand. It's quite straightforward, really. But the bit that has surprised people is that we also are investing in a panel, but it's not a panel, it's not an audience panel. It's not, come into the room and tell us that you're in the room so that we can record that you're watching TV. It's an online behavioral panel. So it's essentially a way of gathering up all of the behaviors that you're doing with full consent and, paying you for the privilege at a decent scale. And it turns out that, 30 years ago, an online behavioral panel, there used to be this panel in the US called Compete, I think, and it died a death. And I was a real fan of it but it was far too expensive. But these days, because everything I do is recorded in a login somewhere, it's actually really cheap as a research exercise to get people to share that data with you. So, we'll get to a panel of about 15,000 people, which is twice the size of
Very big, by the way, panels.
Okay, yeah.
People don't know this, yeah.
And I have a theory that there's this sort of, one of the things that we're trying to do is there's this kind of market failure in panels, behavioral panels, where there's everyone's got like a 5K panel. I'm like, I don't want that. The stats don't behave themselves at 5,000 people. It's no good to me. But you've got one, and you've got one, and you've got one. If only there was one panel with 15, that'd be amazing. So we hope that we're going to bootstrap some sort of development in this world where people will get people over this kind of death valley of panel size, and then they'll start to grow because other use cases become tractable.
Yeah.
But no, I'm going to get to the end. So the third bit is where we have a kind of hybrid where we say, okay, the tag gives us the short-term spikes, but we already know that the short-term spikes aren't enough for TV. However, if we have this panel as well, and we have all of their behaviors online, the Amazon purchases, the searches, whatever it is, and if we can categorize those with, magic of machine learning into buckets per brand, then we get a kind of a very rich outcome signal, and we get it over a sustained period of time. But crucially, weeks and maybe a month or two, but within quarter. I'm not talking about, years down the line. Just tell your finance person to do a DCF and it'll all be fine. This is just near-term outcomes. And by having what we've shown with the pilot is that you can actually make that work cost effectively. So in the old days, it used to be called a single source panel, and they were incredibly expensive because you had to pay them to do a diary or scan all of their purchases that they brought home, and you had to pay for all the TV measurement kit. Now we don't have to pay for either of those things because the TV knows what you're watching, and your phone knows what you're buying.
I'll
So
skip to
suddenly,
my punchline
yeah,
here is I have no problem with panels, by the way. I'm on board with
yeah,
panels. I think the only thing the only panel can never account for is it can never control for people who agree to do a panel. But other than that, it's great.
yeah,
As long as that's not a big deal. And then honestly, like as you
yeah.
mentioned, like what has basically happened is it's not it's not this big life decision to join a panel anymore. And so
Yes, yeah,
it,
that's
it, it
exactly it. Yeah,
it's
it's
a
much less
marginal thing,
intrusive.
right? And
Yeah,
so you can use it broadly. Yeah.
yeah. Oh, I can get some money for my Google search data. I don't search for porn. That's fine. I'm happy to share
Right, there we
that.
go.
Great.
Yeah.
Oh god, that's a thread I'm not going to pull. Okay, so the third block of the dashboard is then something which is running a model behind the scenes, which is taking your short-term lifts
Yeah.
and projecting those out. But crucially, it's projecting them out on a really robust model. So this is the bit where you get into, I suppose, if I have a complaint about the platforms, it's not at what they've done and built. The prediction models inside YouTube or TikTok or whatever are some of the glories of planet scale data science. They
Hmm.
are amazing accomplishments, to de-risk the media revenue equation to the point where you can allow people to buy an outcome rather than buying an eyeball. That's really hard, and it's tremendous that these machines have managed to do that.
Absolutely.
But poking those models when I was there, you sort of go, oh, and this is pre LLM, right? Those models knew lots. I mean, the model that does the prediction of ad completion in YouTube knows more than every human put together has ever known about the relationship between media context and content and audience,
Hmm.
because it has to. That's its job.
Hmm.
And yet we never get a chance to ask the model. It's like there being an equivalent of Chat GPT. Let's call it a large outcome model, but you can only ever access the model indirectly. So you can't give it a prompt yourself. You
Hmm.
can only access it by putting money in the slot to keep buying media impressions or media outcomes. And that I don't think is right, because the alternative, if you're a single advertiser, and you do the I think the best at this in terms of extracting the most value from a single advertiser's data.
Hmm.
But you, certainly for TV type stuff, you just don't have enough training data, if you want to think of it that way. You can't, an MMM is dumb as a bag of rocks, and it has very little brain capacity for learning. And that's just as well because you're only giving it a little bit of data to learn anyway. It's that Larson cartoon, please sir, can I be excused? My
Yeah.
brain is full. And so you can't learn much as a marketer on your own these days, I think, for some channels. And to do the learning, you have to learn collectively. And so the lovely thing about this data set that we're now building is that we've got clean data for, at the moment, I mean, probably about 600 brands where it's robust. And so we
Hmm.
can build a model across all 600 brands, which has got a lot more life experience. It's dealt with small brands, it's dealt with large brands, it's dealt with different outcome signals. And so suddenly that model, is it going to be as good as the platform models? No, because it can't predict at impression level. But what it can do is say, given everything I know, and given what I'm seeing right now, I am going to give you a sense of what sort of near-term value we are creating. So that
We
brings us
we
right
we
back to
can't
the
yeah,
beginning.
we can't interrogate these models.
Yeah,
Can't ask them like little questions. You don't have to tell the whole thing, but if we could, it'd be so powerful, right?
wouldn't
Like
it be amazing?
so an advertiser is one way to benefit, but think about like I love that your example on the viewers, ad completion and viewing kind of insights, right? Because it's like, can you imagine how much better like the open internet would be? So think of so all of click
Yeah,
spam would go away because what is click spam? It's an ad network trying to charge for an outcome that behind the scenes it doesn't actually know what's going to cause a click
yeah,
at all. The only thing it can do is say, well, we know what's click spam. We know what we can trick anyone into doing.
yeah.
and here's our like five tricks of the month, and it's the belly fat one and the this one, and then and it's like, okay, yeah. So, imagine the insight of like, hey, YouTube doesn't have to share its full secret sauce, but if it could say, we're going to democratize, here's how content affects outcome,
Yeah.
completion, right? Or if we could modularize these and be more transparent with it, my God, you might actually have like a that might clean up a lot
It
of
would
the
be amazing,
problems on
wouldn't
its
it?
own.
It's yeah. But
You
there's
know,
no way of what. In fact, I'd be interested to know what you think about that because there's that whole sort of open internet, open web thing. I is there any hope, or is it just going to continue to be the weirdest sort of Ponzi scheme?
yeah, I think it. I think everyone I know who's passionate about it. I think we know similar people who are like the most passionate about it. I think all their the main narratives around like what needs to change and why, I think are all like true. I think I I personally don't care as much about updating, say, legislation or pursuing like kind of the legal and ethical
Yeah.
side of it. Because for me, like what I would say, what I would challenge anyone is like, you can bring me all of your, the worst cases or the biggest frauds or, gaming the auction markets or, all these things that are probably going on and probably all true and probably all bad. In totality, as bad as that is, it pales in comparison to the systems when working don't work. If open internet
Okay.
advertising was
Yeah.
meaningfully effective, the best way to monetize it wouldn't be fraudulent strategies, right? And so I think by and large, there's just not an honest conversation about that, which is that like when this thing is working at full steam and the best capacity, it's not effective. Um,
Yeah.
and so what do
Yes.
we do about that? And by the way, it's not an but like no, but that's not, I mean, first of all, everyone would a lot, not everyone. People would probably, the people who care probably want to fight me on those concepts and whatever. Like I'm not here to like I truly don't care about I have no dog in this fight. I don't I would much rather an open broader set of companies succeed than a few big ones. But other than
Mm.
that, it's not about that. It's not about picking favorites. I'm just saying that like when you look at these things, what you'll find is like, yeah, like the reason why nefarious strategies take over is when there's like an underlying issue with some sort of system that isn't working when it's working. And I think that would be worth discovering. I think it would be fair. I don't know what I would do to fix it. I don't care enough to solve it. The only proposition I would have is like maybe I would make I could conceive of a way to like generate like there's like a driver's test for drivers, right? Like maybe there should be legislation to say like you can't run an advertising network unless you can prove that you can predict things. And we have like independent tests. And if you can't prove on independent
I
tests that
love that.
you're, then maybe you're not allowed to run CPV or CPC or CP, what, maybe you're just not deemed eligible to
Yeah.
run an outcomes-based platform because like, frankly, you don't have a way to do it. And I have no
Yeah.
idea what that would look like, but maybe that's one idea, right? But to me, that's better than just trying to like throw lawsuits at it or like essentially like dragging it into like the bigger questions around like what's fair and right are good
Yeah.
questions, but I feel like a lot of people are spinning their wheels and not going to get very far.
Yeah. No, and it's too late. All of those things were bad, but they happened a long time ago,
A long time ago. Yeah.
Google will. I mean, I don't know, but Eric Seifert talks about how they're it's less than 10% now for them. At which point you go, "Pff, whatever, we've got other things to worry about. Let's just get rid of it. It's such a headache, and it costs us about that much in lawyers." Um, so there was something that Olivia Corey said that I thought was really interesting. She talked about auditing, and maybe you see this as well. She talked about auditing campaigns from different advertisers as
Hmm.
they come in to sort of set up for measurement. And her observation was there was a very clear, kind of bright line in that those advertisers that had had some sort of classical agency involvement they all had some kind of open web programmatic on the plan.
Hmm.
And none of the advertisers that were running their stuff in-house did.
Yeah.
And that really made me wonder, hence the sort of slightly glib Ponzi scheme comment, that really made me wonder, is really all that's happening here is it's a way of laundering money through an ecosystem that isn't doing anything for advertisers, but is a way that admittedly cash-strapped agencies in difficult positions can make a bit of money back
Yeah. And
somehow.
the argument against that hypothesis would be, well, it's the systems created a situation where a time-bound in-house business that has limited resources. Unfortunately, this is now such a small thing that they don't, like, none of them
Yeah,
universally have the ability to shave off that, not
yeah.
just money, but time to care about that, because these things have gotten too big. And yeah, it's a great question. I don't have an answer. I do not know which is right. I love the question because it means I'm not the only one saying and positing controversial things on this recording. So, no, I could, I, wow. Anyway, I'm sure we will, and continue this conversation on this and many of the other topics. I really appreciate you spending all this time with me, and catching up. This is
That's a
lovely. I wish I could do this all
pleasure.
day. I guess before you go, any
Hmm.
final question, and then I'll let you go. What advice would you leave, someone who's either joining your team or joining this industry, or, think back to, like, how did you, and, why you got into this in the first place? Like, there's people who are in those similar positions, right? They're deciding on their career, or they go into academics, or do they go into industry, or they go into, I guess, what, if people are starting to choose the path that you've gone down, any advice for them?
I would say that I think the technical stuff more and more these days is learnable,
Hmm.
but the kind of the wider, this is going to end up weirdly being something in praise of humanities degrees, which I wasn't expecting until you just asked me the question. But there's a way in which, for example, sociologists grapple with quantitative material. And my observation would be that, people on my team, those that have had a bit of that, have had a glimpse of that way into quantitative disciplines, even, economists as well, although that's kind of more obvious. I think coming in those paths rather than the pure kind of comp sci, yeah, I can do all the things in all the languages. I've interviewed data scientists who said, yeah, I don't really care what the data's from. I will just analyze the heck out of it. They might not have said heck, well, really? But unless you're interested a bit in in the domain, and how marketing relates to people, it's weird. Marketing is a weird thing. So I pay more for this paracetamol rather than that paracetamol because it's got a different picture on the front. And not only that, but it works better for me and I feel better about it. So there is a
Yeah.
value exchange. I'm not just being ripped off. That is weird. And being interested in that bit of human behavior, I think is quite important. And it's it is learnable, but it's why I'm glad that I came the strategy path. I mean, I did a physics degree partly, and then I changed to social science, and then ended up in agencies and that kind of world. And I was always a bit of a misfit for that world. I was always going to end up coming back into more quantitative things. But I'm very glad that I have sat on the floor of a creative team's office arguing about where the comma should go, and and worrying about whether something is going to be funny or not, because those are, forget all the other stuff that people are worrying about right now. Those are the things that make us human.
Yeah.
And I did a thing recently. We did an end of year review video for the team, and then because I was mucking about, I got Claude, I think it was, to write up the conversation we'd had to get it to produce the video. And then I said, write it up in the style of GLaDOS from Portal. As you do, right? And there was this amazing line at the end which said that, you know, your sole contribution to this whole thing was an SSH password and a functioning sense of humor. This has been noted. There will be cake. Yeah. And you go, okay, right. I'm living in a totally different world now, where the fact that I possess a sense of humor, or well, I mean, my children would argue about that, but anyway, you know, it is an asset, and yet in sort of marketing LinkedIn, it gets turned into this sort of, oh, those machines can never understand what I've been through as a human. Like, it's just monkeys and typewriters. They will get to better places than you can.
Well, it warms my heart as a son of an opera singer and a percussionist and a humanities degree holder myself. You couldn't have, you know, if you were trying to score brownie points with me, you succeeded in beyond any expectation. So thank you so much. This has been wonderful. I will promote the heck out of this conversation, Samir. I've been lucky to have some great folks chat with me up this year, but I'm gonna do my best to have this episode break our viewership record. So I'm gonna get it out there. I think everyone should hear your not just your stories, but also your advice. I think you've shared a ton. I think you're doing a lot of great work, and I'm excited to see what you guys do next over at ITV. And I'm always watching and kind of seeing from a little bit afar, but also watching very closely all the progress you guys are making and sharing along the way. So thank you, Samir.
Trying. Thank you. It's good to chat.